A loser boy named Atsushi Nakajima was kicked out of his orphanage due to strange occurrences happening around him. He's on the brink of starvation when he sees a man drowning upside down. Is this guy trying to recreate the iconic drowning scene from Titanic? Despite the man's bizarre drowning yoga pose, Atsushi decides to save him. The drowning man, Dazai, reveals himself as a member of the Armed Detective Agency, a group of individuals with supernatural abilities. He casually mentions that he was actually trying to commit suicide. I mean, what a weird way to die with your legs up. Noticing Atsushi's hunger, Dazai invites him to eat at his partner's expense, Kunikita. While they eat, Dazai and Kunikita reveal that they belong to the Armed Detective Agency, a renowned group of detectives with supernatural powers, handling cases too dangerous for the police. Kunikita asks Atsushi if he's seen a human-eating white tiger roaming around town recently. Atsushi panicked, claiming that the white tiger had been following him for the past 2 weeks and was out for his blood. Dazai asks Atsushi to help them find the tiger. Atsushi initially refuses, but when Dazai mentions there's a reward, Atsushi quickly switches to his loser gold digger mode. Later that night, Dazai takes Atsushi to a warehouse where they plan to capture the tiger. As they wait, Dazai remains calm, while Atsushi is convinced the tiger is already stalking them from the shadows. Dazai points out that Atsushi has been seeing the tiger for weeks and has always been in the same towns as the tiger. He then reveals that Atsushi himself has the ability to transform into a creature under the full moon's light. When Atsushi transforms and unconsciously attacks, Dazai activates his own ability, No Longer Human, which allows him to nullify any supernatural power with a simple touch. When Atsushi wakes up, he finds himself surrounded by the rest of the agency. Dazai reveals that Atsushi himself is the tiger they were hunting for and offers him a chance to join the agency. The next day, Atsushi wakes up in a dorm room owned by the Armed Detective Agency. He receives a call from Dazai, who tells Atsushi that there's been an emergency and he needs to get out of the room quickly. Atsushi goes outside and finds Dazai wedged in a barrel. Atsushi asks him what's going on. Dazai explains that he's trying a new method of suicide, but says it's not fatal, just extremely painful. The pair eventually runs into Kunikita, who hurries them to a scene of an actual emergency. A man had taken a hostage and was threatening to blow up the building. Dazai and Kunikita play rock, paper, scissors to determine who would be the one to distract the criminal. Kunikita loses rock, paper, scissors and attempts to negotiate with the man, but is ordered to get on all fours on the table and is unable to do anything else. Atsushi is dressed up like a newspaper boy and successfully distracts the man from the bomb, giving Dazai enough time to subdue the man. The man still presses the detonator and the bomb starts counting down. Desperately, Atsushi throws himself over the bomb to protect everyone else. The bomb does not go off. The whole scene was set up as a test to see if Atsushi was the right kind of person to join the Armed Detective Agency. The president of the agency leaves the decision up to Dazai, who considers Atsushi worthy to be a member of the agency. The scene shifts to an unknown location where a blonde girl tells a man that the were-tiger has been found. Back to agency, Tanizaki apologizes to Atsushi for his crude behavior during the latter's entrance exam. He introduces himself as a member of the Armed Detective Agency, along with his sister, Naomi, who loves his brother just too much. I mean, really too much. Sweet home Alabama. Tanizaki then gets a call from a female client named Higuchi. They meet up with her, and she requests their help in staking out the back alley of her company building. She's noticed some suspicious activity there recently, possibly smugglers. Kunikita instructs Atsushi to join Tanizaki and Naomi for the stakeout. He also warns the rookie to flee if he ever encounters Akutagawa, a notorious port mafia member with a deadly ability. Meanwhile, at a police station, a mysterious figure returns a lost bag to the authorities. The police recognize him as a wanted fugitive, but before they can act, he effortlessly overpowers them using his ability. As he leaves, the bag he left behind explodes. This man is introduced as none other than Akutagawa, Back at the stakeout, Atsushi, Tanizaki, Naomi, and their client, Higuchi, head to the designated area. Tanizaki and Naomi's unusual sibling dynamic is on full display again, but let's just leave them. They reach a dead end, and Higuchi reveals it was all a trap. She contacts Akutagawa, letting him know she's got the targets cornered. Higuchi opens fire on the group, and Naomi shields her brother with her body. Furious, Tanizaki activates light snow to attack Higuchi, but Akutagawa strikes him from behind, impaling him. Akutagawa introduces himself to Atsushi. Atsushi desperately tries to shoot him, but the bullets don't even come close. Akutagawa then uses Rashomon to sever Atsushi's leg. However, Atsushi activates his ability, transforming into a tiger and regenerating his leg. Before the battle escalates further, Dazai arrives, nullifying both abilities with his own, no longer human. He reveals that he had tapped Higuchi during their initial meeting and has been listening in on their plans. Akutagawa retreats, declaring that he shall soon capture the were-tiger in exchange for the black market's 7 billion yen bounty. As Atsushi awakens after his encounter with Akutagawa, he asks Kunikita if Tanizaki and Naomi are okay, and Kunikita tells him they are okay, and Dr. Yosano is treating Tanizaki. That doesn't look a treatment to me, if that's what they call treatment these days. I need some of that Yosano magic. Kunikita advises Atsushi not to panic despite having a bounty on his head while he himself is panicking all over the place. That's the perfect example of easier said than done. During a mafia operation, Ryuro Hirotsu, the Port Mafia's Black Lizard, heads an infiltration in a workers' base suspected of selling Port Mafia cargo to the black market. After finding evidence that confirms their suspicion, Hirotsu lights up his cigarette orders his minions to kill the workers. As the police arrive, Atsushi heads to the scene and hears about the danger of the Black Lizard from the crowd. Thinking that they might soon attack the agency in a worst-case scenario, Atsushi decides to quit the agency. He contacts Higuchi and challenges her to catch him, thinking that doing so would keep his comrades from harm. As Atsushi bids farewell to a confused Kunikita, Higuchi assembles Black Lizard to raid the agency. Meanwhile, Akutagawa visits an imprisoned girl and attacks her with Rashomon. Black Lizard arrives at the agency's front door and barges in. As they begin their assault, the wandering Atsushi hears gunshots coming from the agency's direction. He rushes back to their headquarters only to find Kunikita, Kenji, and Dr. Yosano easily overpower the enemy's forces. As Atsushi realizes that the agency seems more violent than Port Mafia, Kunikita reprimands him for leaving his post, despite now being a member of the agency. Upon hearing these words, Atsushi chuckles and weeps, as well as trying hard to hide his tears from Kunikita and the others. While the agency tidies up their headquarters after Black Lizard's raid, Kunikita assigns Atsushi to accompany Rampo Edogawa, a detective at the Armed Detective Agency, for a murder case. They later arrive at the crime scene and meet Officer Minora, who tells them their help is no longer needed. He adds that the victim is his subordinate, Yamagiwa, who was found floating in the river that morning. At that point, the police have caught another person from the river, who turns out to be Dazai, simply drifting along. Minora reminds Rampo that their help is no longer necessary, believing that his own men are superior to them. To test this claim, Rampo asks Minora's fellow officer, Sugimoto, to solve the case within 60 seconds, but he fails. Minora then asks Rampo to prove himself. Rampo activates super deduction, after which he claims that the killer is Sugimoto. As evidence, Rampo asks for Sugimoto's gun, which should lack ammo from firing 3 bullets. Sugimoto stands in silence and later points his gun toward Rampo. Atsushi, however, restrains him. Sugimoto is interrogated at the station, where they learn that he was a spy for a Diet member whom Yamagiwa has found evidence of corruption. When Sugimoto confronted Yamagiwa, he threatened to kill himself to force her to hand him the evidence. In the end, Yamagiwa tried to stop him, but Sugimoto accidentally pulled the trigger on her. Asking the Diet member for help, Sugimoto was instructed to fire 2 more bullets to make it seem like the Mafia's doing. He then set her body adrift in the river to delay discovery. With the case closed, Minoru thanked Rampo for his help and apologized for his earlier behavior. On their way back to the agency, Dazai tells Atsushi that Rampo doesn't actually have an ability. He merely uses his intelligence and deduction in solving cases, which is why the agency highly respects the great detective. As Dazai tries another suicide attempt again by eating a poisonous mushroom, Atsushi tries to snap him out of its side effect. Kunikida ignores Dazai and focuses on his work when he receives a new task from the president concerning the mysterious disappearances of Yokohama visitors. The three head to Rokuzo Taguchi's base of operations to ask for the source of an anonymous tip regarding the case. Rokuzo, a cyber hacker employed by Kunikida, informs them that the tip came from the Azure Messenger. Kunikida then calls a cab to head to an abandoned hospital mentioned by the tipster. Atsushi is introduced to the cabbie, an informant for the agency. As they investigate the hospital, they hear a lady screaming for help. They rush to the basement to find her left to drown in a glass tank. Kunikida shoots at the glass and successfully saves the woman, Nobuko Sasaki. Kunikida asks Dazai what he thinks about this whole situation, and he says that she is looking pretty hot, and, of course, Kunikida gets angry. Yeah, Dazai is a real simp. She also tells them that there seem to be other abducted people at the hospital. Though the group locates them, a gas is released in their chamber, killing the captives. News later spread of the agency's failure to save the victims of the Yokohama serial disappearances. Later, Kunikida realizes who the possible culprit is. He calls for the cabbie and names him the kidnapper behind the abductions. As they correctly pinpoint his motives and connection with organ traffickers, the cabbie requests protection in exchange for turning himself in after he had kidnapped a Port Mafia member. Just then, the Mafia attacks their cab, and the cab driver flees out of fear. As Dazai pursues the driver and Atsushi tries to contact backup, Kunikida faces Akutagawa. Though their battle is interrupted as the police arrive, the cab driver is handed to the police, while the group heads to the supposed meeting place with the traffickers. The building turns out to be the Azure King's hideout years ago, where he had blown himself up together with 5 detectives after his location was given to the police by Kunikida. One of the detectives was Rokuzo's father, and Kunikida believes himself liable for setting the bomb off due to his report. At that point, they receive a request to disarm a bomb who turns out to be the Azure Messenger. The agency convenes regarding the Azure Messenger bomb threat, which can decimate the majority of Yokohama. The client poses a challenge to the agency to disarm the bomb by sundown, lest word of their failure spread if they cannot complete the task. Fukuzawa, the president of the Armed Detective Agency, issued his orders to the agency on a mission to save Yokohama and fight for the agency's reputation. Kunikida enlists Rokuzo's help in tracing the bomb-building equipment. Meanwhile, Dazai spends some time with Sasaki, but Kunikida and Atsushi visit him to brief him on their earlier meeting. Nevertheless, Dazai asks for Nobuko's opinion on the Azure Messenger from the perspective of a social psychology teacher, as she is a professor. She suggests that the Azure Messenger may be related to or might be the Azure King himself. Later, Rampo has returned from a case and has deduced that the bomb was set in a fishing tackle store in Nigishi. On their way, Kunikida and Atsushi are contacted by Rokuzo and Rampo, respectively, saying that the remote of the bomb is located at a former Defense Force facility. Dazai is also contacted by Fukuzawa, who reports that the cab driver has died. The three head to the defense facility, where the enemy forces ambush them. Dazai and Atsushi look for the transmitter. Kunikida repels the shooters, but he then faces an ability person who can send a person in any direction, and a countdown would appear on person's hand, and when that number hits 0, the person dies. He also breaks the key to the transmitter. Meanwhile, Dazai and Atsushi locate the transmitter but face a heavyweight opponent, with Dazai and Atsushi unable to fend off the man in physical combat and Kunikita trapped in the numbers. Ability. Then Kunikita and Dazai switch places through a wire gun. Dazai nullifies the user's ability, while Kunikita easily defeats the opponent. Kunikita also recreates the release key through his ability, Dopo Poet, which creates anything he has seen as long as it is the same size as his book, and successfully disarms the bomb. Sasaki chances upon Kunikita at the cemetery and tells him she lied earlier about her significant other who has actually died. Dazai contacts Kunikita and meets him at the abandoned hospital. He tells Kunikita that he has contacted and invited the mastermind behind the incident to the hospital. Rokuzo arrives, though he is not the perpetrator, and simply hacked into Dazai's account to face the real mastermind. At that point, Rokuzo pushes Kunikita out of the way and is shot by Sasaki, the Azure Messenger, whose significant other was the Azure King. As she explains her motives, Dazai drops his gun onto Rokuzo, who fires at and kills Sasaki out of vengeance for his father before he himself is gone forever. The next day, Dazai is approached by a young girl who activates her ability in the middle of the streets. The next day, Atsushi tells the agency that Dazai has gone missing, but they think that he is merely on a typical suicide attempt. Later, Dr. Yosano arrives and asks Atsushi to accompany her on a shopping trip where he carries a pile of her gifts. Along the way, Atsushi encounters a girl in a kimono with whom he exchanges glances. As they ride the train on their way back to the agency, the train conductor announces an experiment which turns out to be a bombing incident. After the explosion, the conductor calls on Atsushi to surrender himself. Dr. Yosano and Atsushi agree to catch the culprit and split up to locate the bombs. As Dr. Yosano heads to the front car, she meets the bomber, Moto Jirokaji, of the Port Mafia. Atsushi goes to the rear car and sees the girl he met earlier, who receives instructions on the phone to protect the bomb at all costs. She activates her ability, Demon Snow, and slashes Atsushi. Kyoka Izumi introduces herself to him, stating that she has killed 35 people in 6 months. Dr. Yosano is on the brink of death due to repetitive bombings, while Atsushi cannot fight the girl's ability, wondering if he, alongside the passengers, would die. However, he remains resolute in protecting the passengers despite his formidable foe. After being showered with lemon bombs, Yosano retaliates against Kaji thanks to Thou Shalt Not Die, her ability that allows her to heal any external wounds, including her own, during near-death experiences. Meanwhile, Atsushi partially taps Beast Beneath the Moonlight, turning himself into half-tiger, enabling him to defend himself from Demon Snow's attacks. As he reaches for her throat and asks where the bomb is, Kyoka reveals the bomb strapped inside her kimono. Yosano tells Atsushi through the PA that the bomb has a remote detonator that can disarm the bomb. Kyoka reluctantly hands it to him, and Atsushi presses it only for it to continue ticking. According to the man on her phone, it cannot be stopped. To stop the bomb, Kyoka pushes herself from the train. But Atsushi activates his ability and jumps outside the train to remove the bomb and save her. Akutagawa, the voice who had been instructing Kyoka, disconnects from his phone. He asks a person if he is just a pawn or a master, and that person is Dazai. At the agency's infirmary, Kunikita and Atsushi interrogate Kyoka. She requests them to get her some boiled tofu at Tachibana Temple. After Kyoka eats voraciously, she tells them how she was recruited by the Port Mafia due to her ability and that Akutagawa manipulates Demon Snow through her phone. Kunikita takes his leave to make his report at the agency while instructing Atsushi to hand the girl over to the police. However, he is hesitant to surrender her without giving her a chance. Meanwhile, Dazai is visited by his former apprentice, Akutagawa. He threatens him, but Dazai degrades him in return. Besides his past crew behavior and useless ability, Dazai claims that his new subordinate is far superior to Akutagawa himself. Atsushi strolls with Kyoka, undecided whether to bring her to the police or not. Ultimately, he unwittingly takes her on a date all around Yokohama. Finally, she requests to go with him to the police station, accepting whatever her fate would be amidst Atsushi's reluctance. Suddenly, Atsushi is stabbed from behind by Rashomon. Akutagawa and the Port Mafia arrive. He explains that a transmitter is implanted in her that traces their whereabouts. Atsushi is captured, and Akutagawa brings Kyoka back to their base. All staff are occupied at the agency due to a ministry staff escort request. Tanizaki reports about Atsushi's abduction, but Kunikida and Rampo state various reasons why they should prioritize their request, rather than retrieving Atsushi. Miffed with their reasonings, Naomi brings President Fukuzawa to the room to settle things. The president orders for their current task to be suspended and to instead bring back Atsushi. Dazai is visited by Port Mafia executive and former partner, Chuya Nakahara. After the two exchange hostile pleasantries, Chuya asks why Dazai let himself be caught, but Dazai feigns to have any other schemes other than awaiting his execution. Ultimately, Chuya cuts off his shackles and demands to fight him. The agency scrambles to locate Atsushi, but Rampo remains adamant to help in their search. They locate the company owner of the truck, who might know about Atsushi's whereabouts. Tanizaki heads to the truck site and infiltrates the building, only to find the people killed. Fukuzawa turns to Rampo, who, after the president successfully persuades him to help, deduces that Atsushi is on a vessel traveling toward the open sea. Fukuzawa tosses the agency's high-speed vessel's keys to Kunikida and orders him to retrieve Atsushi. Dazai and Chuya engage in hand-to-hand combat, with Chuya gaining the upper hand with relative ease. As Chuya asks him one last time why he allowed himself to be captured, Dazai answers that he did it for Atsushi, to see who put the 7 billion bounty on him. Moreover, Dazai informs Chuya that he delivered a letter to the Mafia's upper executives that would leak Mafia intel to the public should Dazai be killed in his detention. Kyoka visits Atsushi inside the cargo room, but Akutagawa pulls him out into the open with Rashomon. Akutagawa spites him, leaving Atsushi curious about where his hatred is coming from. Kyoka attempts to save Atsushi, but Akutagawa quickly repels her and advises her to continue killing with Demon Snow, which he believes to be an ability incarnate of slaughter if she wishes for her life to have meaning and purpose. Kunikida then locates Atsushi, while Kyoka allows him to escape after she detonates explosives to sink the vessel. Kunikida urges Atsushi to jump and leave the girl behind, thinking they cannot always save others. However, Atsushi steals his resolve and rushes to save her, believing that she, like how the agency once took him in, can still be given a second chance to live a life beyond killing. Moments before Akutagawa finishes off Kyoka, Atsushi saves her and lays her at the side. Atsushi and Akutagawa finally face off. The Were-Tiger initially lands attacks on Akutagawa, but Rashomon's devoured space is almost impregnable. Nevertheless, Atsushi's repetitive attacks on the devoured space allow him to find its weakness. Despite Akutagawa switching to a long-range strategy to avoid contact with Atsushi, he later lands a crucial attack on him. Akutagawa continuously inflicts heavy attacks on him, but Atsushi's regeneration allows him to survive Rashomon's assaults. Akutagawa remains far away from Atsushi, but Atsushi uses his tiger's tail to trap Akutagawa in midair. As Atsushi launches an attack, Akutagawa uses his devoured space, but Atsushi breaks it and penetrates through, plunging him into the water. Kyoka awakens and rescues Atsushi from the sinking vessel. As an explosion on the vessel goes off, Kunikida catches the two in his boat, thinking about how Atsushi did a job well done. Dazai hacks into the Mafia's communications records and discovers the one who placed the bounty on Atsushi. Meanwhile, Francis, leader of the guild, perceives how the bounty approach with the Mafia has failed, though he remains confident that his organization shall soon have the promised land. Atsushi's worry about the agency's possible actions to take regarding Kyoka and her notorious record ends up dissipating after he finds out about their fondness for the girl, as the president himself called her to the agency. Kyoka requested him to let her stay. Though Kunikida and Atsushi are initially against it, given the dangers of their work and how the Port Mafia may find her soon, Fukuzawa decides to take her in. In addition to several internal and external injuries, Akutagawa is comatose after his battle with Atsushi. At night, Higuchi is informed that foreign mercenaries abducted Akutagawa and decides to retrieve him. despite her subordinates' disapproval of her plans. She infiltrates the enemy's base, but their number overwhelms her individual effort. The Black Lizard arrives at her aid and completely crushes the enemies. As she comes up to Akutagawa, he apologizes to her, to which she replies that it is merely her job. Later, Officer Minora and his comrade arrive at the agency to discuss a bizarre car explosion case with them. As they left, Atsushi was given the case together with Kenji. They gather as much intel as possible along Yokohamabashi shopping district. Thanks to Kenji's reputation, after they acquire a lead about an association's possible ties with the car explosion, they directly ask them at their base. However, the gang denies any relation with the bomb. Kenji believes their word and immediately leaves the building with Atsushi afterward. Atsushi tries to persuade Kenji about the gang being responsible for the car explosion, but Kenji takes the group's sincere word as the truth. As they head along, the gang corners them and admits that the bomb they built was used to kill an enemy gang member. Kenji merely thanks them for confessing the truth, but a gang member strikes him from behind. However, Kenji is unfazed due to his immense strength, his ability to single-handedly defeat the entire gang. After eating a beef bowl with Atsushi, Kenji goes to sleep. Dazai slacks off in the agency dorm, deciding to report his escape from the Port Mafia by the following day. Then, Dazai asks Atsushi to write a report about the information he found on who placed the bounty on Atsushi. As he discovered from the Port Mafia's communications records, the bounty was funded by the Guild, a North American organization of gifted individuals. Tanizaki barges in and informs them of the arrival of the Guild leader, Francis Fitzgerald, and 2 of his subordinates. Fitzgerald discusses business with Fukuzawa, wishing to purchase the agency. Specifically, he asked him to hand over their gifted business permit, but Fukuzawa refuses. As they leave, Fitzgerald warns Fukuzawa that an agency without employees would cease functioning and tells Fukuzawa that he shall deliver a message in the morning papers. Kenji sees the visitors out, but he vanishes in the elevator as the group exits the building. The next morning, the agency watches the news about the disappearance of a 7-story mafia-owned building overnight, believing it to be Fitzgerald's message. Tanizaki, Atsushi, and Naomi look for Kenji, but Naomi vanishes. Tanizaki notices Fitzgerald's companion and demands she bring Naomi back. Lucy, an apprentice from the guild, activates her ability and brings them, alongside several other civilians, to Anne's room. She explains how they can exit her dimension anytime, but their captured subordinates shall remain behind a door, and their memories of inside Anne's room would disappear. She asks them to play with a gigantic doll-like monster, Anne, in a game of tag. The frightened civilians escape her dimension, leaving only Atsushi, Tanizaki, and a doctor who appears to be looking for a child named Elise inside the room. Lastly, Lucy tells them that if they can get the key into the black door, the hostages shall be freed. Atsushi and Tanizaki decide to play the game, but Anne immediately captures and imprisons Tanizaki. Atsushi counters Anne and manages to reach the door, but the key is actually a feint from the very start. There actually seems to be no way to open the door. Anne gets the upper hand, making Atsushi think that he could not solve the problem without help from Dazai and the others. As he rushes to the exit, the doctor stops him and advises him with a game theory strategy to launch a counterattack on his opponent, encouraging him to save his comrades who had once saved his own life. However, Atsushi is captured towards the door. Lucy turns to the doctor, who exudes a menacing aura that frightens Lucy and even Anne. He tells her to look at the door, finding Atsushi resisting the force, dragging him into the room. Tanizaki had used light snow to create a false door, and Atsushi to tie a ribbon on Lucy without her knowing. Atsushi pulls her towards him and demands she deactivate her ability if she does not want to be dragged alongside him. Atsushi lets go, forcing Lucy to release her ability. With everyone freed, Atsushi tries to approach Lucy, but she runs away in tears. The doctor reunites with Elise, and Kyoka rushes to Atsushi out of worry. As the doctor bids Atsushi farewell, Kyoka trembles in fear at the sight of the man. Later, the doctor turns out to be Ogai Mori, boss of the Port Mafia, to whom his subordinates bow after killing an assassin from the guild. Mori asserts that whoever opposes the Mafia's might shall get annihilated, be it the agency or the guild.